Imagine waking up and discovering that your city simply died. Not from war, not from invasion, but from something much more frightening. Nature turned against you. This really happened. A civilization that built perfect pyramids, that knew more about astronomy than we do today, that mastered advanced mathematics, disappeared in less than 200 years. 8 million people vanished. And the cause? Something so simple you wouldn't even imagine. Something that's happening right now as you watch this video. The Mayans of 800 AD believed they were eternal. Do you think our civilization is too? Stay until the end and discover what really brought down one of the most advanced empires in history and why it should scare you. Do you want to know what this simple cause was? Calm down, I'll tell you. But before that, you need to understand what they built, because when you discover the magnitude of what disappeared, you'll understand why this is so terrifying. The Mayans weren't just primitive Indians, as many think. They were geniuses. While Europe was in the Dark Ages, the Mayans had already invented the concept of zero, something the Romans hadn't even dreamed of. They calculated eclipses with minute precision, predicted astronomical events that we can only confirm today, with computers. We're talking about an empire that lasted over 100 years, longer than the Roman Empire, longer than any modern civilization. Their cities spread across an area larger than the whole of France, from the beaches of the Caribbean to the mountains of Guatemala. And they weren't just a few scattered villages, they were metropolises. Tikal had 200,000 inhabitants, when Paris had only 25,000. Karakul once had more people than medieval London. They built pyramids that dwarfed those of Egypt, with a mathematical precision that leaves us speechless to this day. They had more advanced hydraulic systems than Rome, more productive agriculture than Europe, and a script so complex that it took us 150 years to even begin to decipher it. They were masters of astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and art. Now, imagine a civilization of this magnitude, mastering technologies we would only rediscover centuries later. It simply disappeared, and what destroyed them was something so basic that you'll be shocked when you find out. So, what was it like living in this superpower? In 800 AD and the deaths of Christ? Being Mayan was like living in the future. Seriously, they were centuries ahead of any other civilization. Imagine waking up in a perfectly planned city. I'm not talking about dirty streets and mud houses. I'm talking about wide avenues, monumental plazas, 4-story palaces, and temples, reaching 65 meters high. Everything built with geometric precision that would make a modern architect weep with envy. You'd wake to the sound of drums echoing throughout the city, marking the day's astronomical rituals. The central market bustled with merchants from over 1,000 kilometers away. Cocoa, jade, obsidian, quetzal feathers. It was an economic hub that rivaled any modern metropolis. Children went to school to learn advanced mathematics and astronomy. Yes, you heard that right. They had formal schools when Europe could barely read. They calculated the year to be 365 days long, out of 420. Our modern calculation says 365 in 422, a difference of only 17 seconds. And the food. They had such advanced agriculture that they fed populations larger than many European cities. Corn, beans, squash, tomatoes, cocoa, vanilla. Many of the foods you eat today were developed by them. But here's the detail you need to understand. All this grandeur depended on one thing only. And when it failed, well, you already know what happened. The question is, does this thing that sustained everything still sustain our civilization today? The answer will keep you up at night. This thing that sustained everything was so obvious that they didn't even imagine it could fail. But let's take it easy, because the story gets more interesting when you realize they saw the catastrophe coming. Archaeologists have discovered something disturbing. The Mayans themselves left clues as to what was happening, but no one at the time understood their meaning. Around 750 AD, the inscriptions began to change. The famous stelae, those giant stones, where they recorded their conquests, began to speak less of victories and more of worries. Glyphs that had never been used before appeared, symbols related to hard times and angry gods. Kings stopped building monuments to themselves. Think about it. For hundreds of years, each ruler built temples larger than their predecessors. It was like an eternal ego competition. Suddenly they stopped, simply stopped. And there's something even stranger. They began to write about eclipses differently. Before, eclipses were celebrated events, showing that they knew how to predict the future. But in inscriptions from 750 onward, eclipses are mentioned as a bad omen. Markets began to have fewer exotic goods, trade routes shortened. Cities that previously received jade from Mexico and obsidian from Guatemala began to use only local materials. And modern scientists have discovered something that will give you chills. Tree rings from that time show that they stopped growing, normally. Pollen preserved in lakes reveals that certain plants simply disappeared from the region. Nature was warning, the Mayans were recording the warning, but no one connected the dots until it was too late. And the cause? That simple thing I mentioned was literally falling from the sky, or rather ceasing to fall. Ceasing to fall. Exactly. The answer is simpler and more terrifying than you might think. Rain. The thing that sustained the largest empire in the Americas was simply water from the sky. It seems absurd, doesn't it? How such an advanced civilization could depend on something so basic. But therein lies the problem. They were so good at everything that they forgot to create a plan B. The Mayans didn't have large rivers like the Nile or the Euphrates. All their water came from rain. They built incredible systems to capture every drop. Underground cisterns, canals, reservoirs. When it rained, they could store water for months. The problem is they never imagined the rain could stop, and it did. Between 750 and 950 AD, the region suffered the worst drought in over 3,000 years. Scientists were able to prove this by analyzing lake sediments, ice cores, and even stalactites. Precipitation dropped by 60%. In some years, it practically didn't rain at all. Imagine the situation. You have 8 million people depending on rain for drinking, for irrigating crops, for everything. And suddenly the sky simply stops. Not for weeks, for decades. The reservoirs dried up, the fields cracked, the crops died. And here's the scariest part. The more advanced the city, the faster it died, because larger cities needed more water, more food, more of everything. Tikal, the largest of them all, was one of the first to collapse. Its giant cisterns, once a source of pride, turned into death traps. The larger the population, the faster they hit rock bottom. And you know what's most terrifying? This wasn't a one-off event. Scientists have discovered that droughts like this occur in cycles in the region, every 200 to 300 years. The Mayans of 800 AD were unlucky enough to build their civilization between two major droughts. Now the burning question. Our civilization also depends on resources that could simply stop arriving. The answer is yes, and you won't believe the speed at which everything collapsed. Brace yourself because it will shock you. A 15-year-old civilization disappeared in less than 150 years. It's as if our modern civilization disappeared between now and 2170. And it all started with a noise that ceased to exist. Imagine the silence. You're used to hearing rain pounding on the roof, right? Now imagine that sound simply disappearing. Month after month, year after year, the first sign that something was seriously wrong. And then everything collapsed like dominoes. First famine. When supplies ran out, people began to fight for food. I'm not talking about arguments. I'm talking about civil war. Cities that had been allies for centuries attacked each other over a handful of corn. Archaeology reveals massacres, shattered skulls, skeletons of entire families found in abandoned houses. The nightmare began in 810 AD, when Copan, one of the richest cities, simply ceased to exist. There was no invasion, no earthquake. People simply left. And here's the scariest part. The more the cities tried to save themselves, the faster they died. Palenque increased human sacrifices, thinking this would induce the gods to send rain. As a result, they killed so many people that no one was left to work the fields. Caracol built giant walls around the city, trying to protect its last water reserves. But walls don't make rain. In 830 AD, they found the city empty, dishes still on the table, half-finished temples, abandoned children in the streets. Tikal, the Mayan superpower, resisted until 869 AD. Its last inscription is chilling. The king left. We don't know when he'll return. Spoiler, he never did, and the pace only increased. An Shilan fell in 808, Quirigua in 810, Pila in 830, Sable in 869. One by one the lights went out. Within 50 years, virtually every major city in the south was empty. But here's the detail that will keep you up at night. The Northern Maya watched it all happen. They watched their sister cities die one by one and did nothing, thinking it would be different for them. And that's when they learned a lesson our civilization still hasn't grasped. What lesson? That no one is safe when nature decides to take its toll. And the Northern Maya learned this the hard way. Chichen Itza, Usma, Mayapan. These cities thought they were safe. After all, they were in the north, far from the chaos. They had cenotes, those deep natural wells that never ran dry. They thought, we're smarter, we have guaranteed water. But don't they understand something? When 8 million people flee famine, they don't vanish into thin air. They go somewhere. And guess where they went? Exactly, north. Suddenly, cities planned for 50,000 people took in 200,000 refugees. The cenotes, which seemed infinite, began to shrink. The food ran out, and the same tragedy repeated itself. But 200 years later, the Mayans didn't die. That's a myth. They adapted, changed, evolved, survived. Today, more than 6 million people speak Mayan languages. They still practice ancestral rituals, still use calendars their ancestors created 1,000 years ago. But here's the lesson our civilization needs to understand. They survived because they learned to live with less. They abandoned megacities, returned to smaller communities, stopped relying on giant centralized systems. And we are doing exactly the opposite. Our cities are bigger, our dependence on resources is larger, our population is larger. We are more vulnerable than the Mayans ever were. The difference is that the Mayans depended on rain. We depend on oil, industrial agriculture, global electrical systems, the internet. And when any of these systems fail, well, you've seen what happens. Most frighteningly, scientists say we are entering an era of extreme climate change. Longer. Droughts, stronger storms, more unstable natural systems. Exactly what destroyed the Mayans. The question is not whether our civilization will face the same test. The question is, when it does, will we be smart like the Mayans who survived, or stubborn like those who disappeared? So do you still think our civilization is different? Because I spent weeks researching this story, and one thing sticks in my mind. The Mayans also thought they were special. They also thought they were eternal. They also looked at previous civilizations that had disappeared and thought, it will be different with us. But here's what keeps me up at night. We have something the Mayans never had. We know what happened to them. We know how civilizations die. And yet we keep doing the same things. Look, if this video made you think even for 5 seconds about the fragility of our civilization, do one thing for me. Leave a like. It's not just to help the channel, it's to get more people to see this, to get more people to stop and think. And if you want to continue this conversation, subscribe to the channel and comment below. What you think is the weak point of our civilization? What would make us collapse like the Mayans, the internet, oil, agriculture? I read all the comments and reply, oh, and share this video with someone you think needs to see it. Because knowledge that isn't shared is knowledge lost, and we've already lost too much knowledge. Next week I'll tell you how Easter Island cut down its last tree, knowing it was the last, and therefore should terrify us even more than the Mayan story. Until then, look around, take a good look, and ask, how much time do we have? The answer may be less than you think. M.